Perfect. So we are now starting the webinar. So I'll give everyone a couple of seconds, couple of minutes for everyone to join. Yes, thanks for joining today. I can see everyone is slowly coming forward and joining us online. But my name is Ines, and I'm OutThink's Head of Solutions Engineering. I'll be your host today for the webinar on the importance of human risk quantification. We are joined by two experts, one of them being Paul DeLuca, the Head of Cyber Risk at HPE, and the other one being Flavius Pleshu, the CEO and founder of OutThink. The aim of this webinar is basically to explore the challenges and opportunities of quantifying human risk and how basically organizations can implement effective strategies to minimize these risks and kind of takes that we have on this topic as well. Before we start, I'll ask Paul and Flavius to introduce themselves to everyone to say a few words. But Paul, would you like to kick us off on this?
Yeah, sure. Hopefully you can hear me. As Anish
Yes.
said, I'm head of cyber risk management at HPE. I've been doing this for more years than I care to remember. And my focus is on putting numbers around risk, as David Vose would say, because quite frankly, what gets measured gets done. Typically, what gets rated tends to leave you in a bad place. So you have to measure first.
Perfect, thank you. And Flavius, would you like to say a few words as well?
Sure. Well, first of all, I'm really excited about this webinar today. Human risk management, human risk quantification. It's something I've been, quite frankly, obsessing with over the last 8 years. It's a passion of mine now. I've been in security for a number of years. I was a CISO at some point. That was before I got really excited and started OutThink. Today, OutThink is a cybersecurity human risk management platform. It's SaaS, and we have customers across the world, ranging from a couple of hundred people to tens of thousands of employees using it to really improve their security.
Perfect, thank you. I guess then we can kind of move on. Today, we have a bit of an agenda. This is just to keep us all on track and focused on the topic that we have to cover, but also we'll start with kind of understanding the journey, what brought us here, understanding human risk, how can we prioritize it, how to look for it, how to quantify it, and how can basically organizations support their employees, support their people by understanding them as well. And of course, we'll give a few minutes, 10-15 minutes for a few questions as well. So I do ask you to, if you have any questions, please place them in the Q&A box, and we will come to it towards the end. If we don't have time to cover them all, don't worry, we will make sure to have a channel where you can do so, and we'll address them offline. But if we would like to just start, gentlemen, I will start with you, Flavius, to take us on this journey and tell us a little bit about cybersecurity today, basically.
Hey, thank you, Ines. Yeah, as I said, I've been doing this for a while, and I guess if we look at where we are today, quite frankly, cybersecurity losses, financial losses are at an all-time high. Things are not getting better while cybersecurity budgets continue to increase. Yes, the practice of cybersecurity, of risk management is maturing. That's fantastic. But as it stands today, according to the World Economic Forum, cyber has become the second biggest issue of the decade, right after climate change. And then in terms of losses, these are estimated anywhere between currently $7 to $10 trillion. So if this were a country by GDP, cyber would be third in the world, just behind the US and China. So we've got work to do. if we look at cybersecurity, I guess traditionally it's been all about technology, right? The firewalls, the antivirus, access management, penetration testing, vulnerability management, technical vulnerability management, all that good stuff. However, today, this is data from the UK, from the regulator for the Data Protection Act, the Information Commissioner's Office. Today, 90.7% of all breaches the ICO is investigating are linked to human risk factors. And this is happening while 90% of cybersecurity functions are running an awareness program. So what's that telling us? Well, if we still go back, please, to the previous slide, there were a couple of other points I wanted to make there. That's telling us, and it's not just the numbers, there's actually a Gartner report that came out in November last year, which is basically saying two things. Traditional security awareness solutions don't really achieve much more than compliance. And Gartner's urging organizations to shift their focus from security awareness to serious human risk management outcomes. And that's what we're going to cover today. How do we go about this? On the next slide. Perhaps my connection is a bit slow. There's a bit of lag, it seems. This is where we are. Today, it's mainly security awareness. And if we do talk of human risk, that's unfortunately poorly understood. As a result, we're seeing the results not really well managed. And instead of risk quantification, we're relying on metrics such as knowledge, test, training completion, and phishing click rates. Well, how do we get there? How do we get to a higher level of maturity? Well, there's 5 steps, and we're going to cover these 5 steps. I guess we're giving people slightly more than we promised. We under-promised. We're going to over-deliver today with you, Paul. We're going to talk about the end-to-end process, not just the quantification. Let's start with understanding the risk, prioritizing how and where to look for those human risk factors. Let's see how can we be a bit more systematic about that risk identification, consistent with the risk evaluation, and how can we help our businesses, the cybersecurity function, the various stakeholders around the business to make better decisions. So the hope is we will get to this destination, and that will be a data-driven, cost-effective human risk management approach. A quantum leap from yesterday's security awareness and phishing simulations approaches.
And Paul, I guess how do we go about this approach? How should we kind of focus on this, or how do we navigate that?
So quite frankly, this is just picking up on the previous slide. Fundamentally, I think this subject area is poorly understood. If you ask 2 people to explain it, you'll probably get 3 or 4 different answers. So we need, clear definitions, clear use of language. We need to be clear about how we identify where we're going to prioritize our focus. So typically, focus, I believe, should be prioritized on things that give us the greatest reward, and conversely, things that would hurt us the most were we to have a bad day. And if I take that back to business speak, I'm looking at the things that earn us the most money, because wherever you look for risk, you will always find it. So let's look for it on those things that earn us the most money, and let's look for risk on those things which, were they to go wrong, would have the greatest pain for us. So that's where I would go about prioritizing where I look for these risks. Similarly, we've all been there doing risk assessments, control assessments, every sort of assessment under the sun. I know that if I have 2 people in my team go out to look at a common scenario and common defects, and they write it up, they'll write it up in 2 or 3 different ways. and poor old readership then has to decipher what they mean by that. So I think that prioritization here should be on articulating risk in a systematic manner. So I try and take that away from the humans. And I know that I'll get told off about removing their creativity, but fundamentally, I want to create or articulate risk in a common standard way that's clear what the defect is. It's clear what we're exposed to. It's clear how bad that pain is, and by implication, when you take those things together, you can make an informed decision around what are you going to do about it. So if the numbers are frightening, you probably want to fix it. If the numbers are well within your write-off budget or well within your appetite, you can take the gamble and live with it. And that approach really is fundamental to supporting informed decisions with the data, as opposed to just guessing and saying our risk is yellow, whatever that means. You can call your risk. You can call your risk yellow. You can rate it yellow. You can call it high, medium, low, critical, this, that, and the other, providing you have the data to substantiate it. What I am against is simply saying the risk is high or the risk is amber, and unless you can build on that and drill into it.
And I'll jump in here for a second. Then, Paul, we've been saying many things, haven't we, around people? Statements such as people, the weakest link, the wet end, and many other things which are far worse. And for as long as I going back now, probably I don't know, 10, 20 years, it felt like a knee-jerk reaction to a half-understood problem. Oh, we have users, problems, quick, spray them with some security awareness training and then pray behaviors will improve overnight. So yeah, I'm with you on that one. We need data, we need numbers, we need a common approach. But I got excited. Back to you.
I'd just jump in. So you always hear about the weakest link in the chain, and you invariably hear that it's the humans who are the weakest link. I think in many cases humans can be the strongest link. Yeah. You just need to understand what we're good at and what we're bad at. I mean, you can ask me to count to 1 million in under 10 seconds, and I'm not going to be able to do it. But you can ask me whether something smells good or bad or indifferent, and I'm probably going to be better at that than some piece of technology. So I think it's very much a case of horses for courses. I think that relying on humans to do things that are better done by technology is doomed to failure. So when you're asked to look at an email and check the grammar and check the spelling and this, that, and the other, which is the typical phishing type awareness training that you grind
click wisely.
Through. Yeah. If a mail that has those attributes in it gets to the intended recipient anyway, that's a failure of technology. We shouldn't be relying on the poor old souls who are busy doing what they're doing to make up for that. Clearly, one can craft legitimately plausible sounding emails, but just don't smell right. And us humans are pretty good at the just don't smell right piece. So we could definitely be the strongest link here.
Absolutely.
And then how do we kind of go about understanding that human risk? How do we define that, Paul?
So I guess this speaks to understanding the factors of risk. We need to understand that some things cause risk, and we can get metadata about people's intention to do the right thing, their aversion to clicking, or their aversion or their natural disposition to click on OK for everything. We can collect that metadata that will influence and guide us to the frequency or the prevalence with which human-centric threats can cause risk. If we know which of those things are more prevalent than others, and we know how bad the result of those things are going to be, we can then prioritize which controls we put in where. Now, that's all predicated on us understanding the need to start measuring stuff that matters rather than simply counting beans, such as, well, what is your click rate? That's a bean counting exercise. And at the end of it, oh, we've got a 5.3% click rate. So what? Whilst knowing the click rate is good, what I really want to know is that when somebody clicks, do we have the control in the background that detonates that in a sandboxed environment so that the blast radius is contained and nobody gets hurt? So click rates are nice to know, but that's not the real benefit here. This diagram is just another version of the previous one. Again, it's talking about those human-centric threats. So and we'll get to some of the examples later on, but those are typically good people simply messing up, bad people doing bad things, including doing bad things to good people, which will then wash through and result in the compromise and unfortunately have an impact on the organization. And hopefully, if we put the controls in the right place, or the right controls against the most prevalent things that hurt us the most, we can take an informed risk-based approach here, rather than trying to skew absolutely everything. And you've seen spend go up and up and up, and crime go up and up and up.
Yeah, it's all about kind of managing that risk, mitigating that impact. Flavius, where can we prioritize? How do we do that? How do we look out for human risks?
Yeah, before I make this more complicated than it possibly needs to be, but I won't spare you the pain. I want to say that I want to go back to the point Paul made. It's exactly that. It's getting data on those risks and driving better decisions around investing in certain controls in certain parts of the organization around our people when we're seeing those human risk factors where the vulnerability, the likelihood of those colleagues falling for a social engineering attack is higher, right? Perhaps we then need to enforce MFA across the board. Perhaps we then need to buy tools that make it easy for people to classify and encrypt files, but we certainly want to prioritize. So how do we look for human risks? Well, I'm obviously going to talk about how our clients are using OutThink, but of course, for those of you not with OutThink just yet, perhaps you have other ways of achieving these results. Perhaps you want to get in touch with us. But here's how we look for those human risks. Well, the first step is let's start identifying. Let's start getting some data in here. It starts with that compliance requirement. If nothing more, your organization may want to demonstrate some due diligence, perhaps some compliance to some security standard. So at that point, you're probably buying a security awareness, a phishing simulation platform. Well, if you happen to buy OutThink and you're deploying OutThink and integrating it with things such as Microsoft Graph API, Microsoft Defender, or Sentinel, then the training goes out. It starts building a baseline. Those interactions, your employees going through those learning experiences, that's starting to measure attitudes. Data coming via Graph, Defender, Sentinel, that's starting to measure real behavior within your organization. And this is a very, very important, often overlooked point. Real behaviors within your organization. Simply knowing that, people might click on phishing links and some of them may use weak passwords. And there's also the drive-by download. How's that helping you? Simply reading a list of behaviors of a website or an article on the internet, or speaking with a colleague at a security conference about all the bad things people may do. How's that helping? So instead of that, let's get some real data in here, the level of access, the attitudes and behaviors of those 10,000 employees in your organization. And then there's data. The second step, the cybersecurity team typically reviews the human risk intelligence generated by the OutThink platform, goes and engages with the business, with IT, with security, and starts validating the human risk factors identified. As the next step, certain risks are being prioritized, certain things that may indeed hurt us. Where we have, for example, we have a high percentage of high risk factors, high human risk factors, and those colleagues are responsible for the delivery of a critical service. Well, perhaps you want to prioritize that in your risk treatment plan at step 4. Hopefully that plan is approved, actions assigned, budget secured. Step 5, it's all about treating the risk. There's various things that will be done. This is, again, not doing more. This is about working smarter. This is about moving away from the spray and pray approach and going in highly targeted after those top human risk factors that are likely to cause some serious pain. And we may decide to make changes to the environment, processes, tools, handle policy exceptions, perhaps. And all this time, the OutThink platform continues tracking changes in those human risk factors, and hopefully you're seeing a risk reduction.
Perfect. And how do we go about quantifying this? What does it mean, really?
It's really bringing all that relevant data together, first and foremost. And I go back to the point of real data, real behaviors, both work and security behaviors. Question for the audience: which of your employees suffer from email fatigue? Are you going to treat those employees the same way as you treat the rest of the workforce? I would speculate that if certain colleagues are receiving hundreds and hundreds of emails, this high email fatigue, perhaps their propensity to click on a link, because the time they can physically spend investigating that email, hovering over those links, I would assume that's higher. So let's get that real data in. Things such as roles, the level of access, the attitudes of your employees, all of that stuff is perfectly measurable. You know, the sentiment, the intentions, and then the behaviors, the real security behaviors of your colleagues. Who's causing, over the last 30 days, which of your colleagues happened to cause a ransomware infection on the endpoint? Sure, the AV dealt with it, but perhaps there's a risk there that we need to look at. So really bringing all of that data together, we can now at an organization level say that our people are 65% vulnerable to a given threat. And then, of course, we can drill down. We can look for certain risk factors across high-risk groups, and we can decide to group people together and go after those risk factors and mitigate those. But yeah, all of this is possible, and quantification is really the precursor of running that human risk management program. It's great to see Gartner so optimistic that in not more than 7 years from now, 80% of organizations will be running human risk management. Great. Let's quantify and let's start managing this risk better.
Thank you, Flavius. And Paul, if you can take us through kind of how do we identify that? How do we systematically identify human risk, and what does it mean for an organization? I think you mute. There you go.
Yeah, it would help if I come off mute, but some people say, well, I don't know. Some people say I make more sense when I'm on mute, and I kind of agree with them. So I guess it's really a case of standing back and really understanding what the causes are. So we need to be clear that there are some things that cause risks, and in the literature they're typically threats, and those pink arrows there effectively say that, you know, some threats are more prevalent than others. We've got bad people doing bad stuff, which are sometimes referred to as adversarial threats. We've got good people messing up, which are the accidental ones. I'll ignore the environmental threats because those aren't initiated by humans. But often the bad people doing bad stuff, the adversarial one, they often target our good people and maybe, well, not maybe, and definitely cause them to slip up more often than not. But if we know what those threats are, we can put some controls in that reduce the likelihood of those threats causing our risk. But they will, those threats will still dominate some of the controls. So those arrows would have been skinnied down by those controls, which means that those threats are less likely, or they cause fewer compromises and fewer impacts. Similarly, we can put in impact reducing controls. Those controls don't stop you having a bad day, but they kind of make your bad day less bad. So they stem the impact. And what we're able to do is that we're able to size the various threats. We're able to size and define the effectiveness of our controls and determine how well those controls are rolled out, and put those into a glorified sausage machine, which goes by the name of Excel. Or if you've got a lot of money, you can buy a risk quantification tool. There aren't very many out there which are any good. And turn the handle on that sausage machine, and you can effectively price the risk that you're facing. So in this scenario here, we're carrying about 9 mil of risk. So I mentioned before about articulating risk in a common way. So fundamentally, we can't change the inherent frequency with which threats come knocking on our door. We can't change the size of the impact that we're going to experience. The only thing we can do is dial up and dial down our controls. So if we know that we've got bad controls, we can work to determine which of those threats are going to overrun us. We can look at the vulnerability to those threats and wash that through to the impact to size the actual confidentiality, integrity, and availability risk. And pretty much every time we think about a risk, or we stumble across a risk, or we find one through an assessment, we should be able to articulate a common statement based on this approach here. So the common statement is something along the lines of, due to these inadequate controls, our people are 65% vulnerable to whatever those threats are, which wash through to about 9 million worth of annualized risk here. That in this scenario, in this case, what it's saying is that we could have a bad day. That bad day could be really, really, really bad, or it might not be bad at all. If I average every potential bad day in my simulation, the average of that is about 9 million. In other words, if you're going to go and buy cyber insurance for some of this stuff, and the insurers are saying, we want to charge you 10 million, then you probably want to turn them away and say, no, I'm going to self-insure. I'm going to put 9 million under my mattress every year and use that. So if nothing else, it puts you on the front foot having those grown-up discussions with insurers. Or when your board asks you, you can turn around and say, we're carrying X dollars worth of risk.
And Flavius, how do we kind of go about measuring that vulnerability? How do we really look into this? What's an effective way to do that?
Yeah, is that 65% number that keeps popping up. It's quite simple. It needs data. It needs real data, and that's what the OutThink platform does really well. That's our human risk intelligence product, aggregating all those measurements of level of access, attitudes, and behaviors together. And we can see, look, this is how vulnerable our people are to threats targeting our organization. On the right hand side there, we can see a screenshot. That's a human risk scorecard for one of those employees, and we see not only the likelihood of that colleague making a mistake, and of course the higher that number, the more likely our people, or in this example, this colleague, is to making that mistake. And there's also some attributes there that help us better understand that number. Why is this colleague vulnerable to threats? Well, they have access to sensitive information. Their psychographic profile is showing apathetic. Yes, they have some knowledge. They do have the intention to comply, and they're fairly confident they can do it. But then when we look at their productivity impact, this person is saying that complying with security policy would seriously slow them down. So high productivity impact. We don't believe that this person will actually behave all that secure. And then, of course, you throw behaviors on top of that, and we're talking about real behaviors. And aggregating all of that up is how we get these numbers. And this is a screenshot of OutThink in action. A organization of about 2,300 people here. At the organization level, that number is 65%. People are vulnerable to threats. Of course, what a customer would do at this point is they would click on some of those risk factors, those high values. They might click on those red squares, filter by departments, by business units, and really focus on those areas of the business carrying a higher level of human risk, and understanding those risk factors and focusing on mitigating those risk factors. That's how we would drive the risk down here.
Perfect, thank you. I am conscious of time, so we are kind of halfway through, and I want to give everyone some time to have their questions answered. But Paul, why don't you kind of tell us a little bit when it comes to what does it mean to have a consistent human risk evaluation? I think you're muted again, Paul. You are trying to test us here.
I'm doing it again. I'm doing it again.
I swear I'm not muting you. I promise.
I've got some noisy traffic in the background, so I try and go off when folk are talking. But fundamentally, I've said it before. What gets measured gets done. If you measure the wrong thing badly, then your results are not going to be very, very helpful. We've got a pretty good idea, and OutThink has got a very, very, very good idea about the metadata, the factors that are really worth measuring. And for example, if you know that Paul DeLuca misaddresses between 5 and 10 emails a month, and I've done that last month, and the last month, and the month before that, and the month before that, and the month before that. If you know that and nothing changes, you can be pretty sure I'm going to be misaddressing between 5 and 10 emails next month and the month after. That's far more valuable than saying, okay, so the threat size is high, medium, or low. If you capture real data with real numbers around it, nobody can argue. You will have experts saying, oh, I think it's this, that, and the other, which is great. They can think it's this, that, and the other, but nothing rings true like real data. So I think I've got, I could say that I think that my intention to comply is really, really high. But if the data doesn't say that, then I'm going to trust the data, not trust a subjective opinion, even a subjective expert opinion, because opinions are like noses. Everybody's got one. Some noses are pretty, some aren't. But if you know what data you need, you can build this little staircase here, which effectively is the steps that you go through in quantifying your risk. It's well, I could rub a few of these out, and you would have the FAIR model. But this is particularly granular. We are looking at individual threat prevalence. We're looking at simulating what the threat will be tomorrow. So that's me misaddressing 5 to 10 emails every month. So the threat prevalence next month should be about 5 to 10. We can look at the effectiveness of controls in there. So if I put a make a checker process in there, then that should prevent 5 to 10 emails going out each month, maybe I'll only be misaddressing, 2 to 3. We can simulate the compromise when and the impact on the business when those emails do go through and the pain is felt. But fundamentally, all we are doing is taking our data points and simulating on each of them and across them all. And what we're able to do at the end of this is come up with pretty much a value at risk position in terms of annualized loss expectancy. Again, it's the stuff that FAIR does. The difference is that we are doing it at a far more granular, and therefore an actionable way.
Thank you.
And
what
we
can you
take,
tell us on this?
Yeah, and so we can then take that that data. We can take those simulations. We can put those in an actionable scorecard. So we know that in this case, if I look at the top left, the business application control, that's carrying somewhere between maybe 70 and 120,000 worth of risk, and the most likely position is somewhere north of 100,000. So that top left diagram shows me how much risk I'm carrying with each of my controls. So BA, the business application controls, I could get that risk all the way down to the bottom of that vertical line, which would be about $60,000. I cannot get that any further than the 60,000 down. So that gives me straight, pretty quickly a view as to what my risk span is by control and where I currently am. I can then pivot across. So instead of looking at controls, I can look at the services, and the services are the things that we sell to earn revenue. So if you're in banking, service A might be retail banking, car loans. Service B might be retail banking, mortgage. Service C might be retail banking and life insurance. So those services are effectively your products that you earn money from. And in the box K, that's basically telling me that the amount of human-centric risk in that service looks pretty frightening. It's somewhere around about the 200K mark. I'm carrying 200K worth of risk in that business product service K. And perhaps if I look at the green bar next to it, it can come down quite a way. Just looking at this, I can roughly see what my return on investment is. If I spend some money, I can halve my risk. The question then becomes, well, how much is it going to cost me? And we'll get to that later. Bottom left is just to finish off. Bottom left is just effectively counting beans. So how many risks is Jeff carrying, and what is he doing about them? And everybody likes a scorecard to make the folk compete against each other. So the little table on the right, bottom right, just helps me focus in on folk to, I guess, encourage them to do things that I'd like them to do. And if they don't want to do it, their name will be here next month and the month after.
Brilliant. And in terms of, you mentioned ROI, and when it comes to kind of supporting these decisions, is ROI playing the most important role? Really, is this how we quantify it? Is this how we put it across and help support these decisions to focus on human risk quantification instead of kind of continuing that kind of tick box exercise, if that makes sense?
So for me, the ROI thing is the back end of this. So traditionally, what happened? Well, no, not what happened. So traditionally, we have folk saying, "Oh, there's a big risk. It's it's yay big, or the risk is high." I want to spend $20 million encouraging my people to be a little bit more forward thinking on what on the way they approach what I'm asking them to do. So I've got a big risk. I want to spend a lot of money. So this risk is red or this risk is amber. I want to spend a lot of money, and at the end of it, the risk is going to be red or amber, or maybe it'll be green. But the issue there is, how many greens make an amber, how many ambers make a red, how many reds, ambers, and greens make a black, whatever a black is. It's all extremely subjective. So if I were to take the data points that I know that OutThink captures for me, and I were to square those with the control effectiveness and the control rollout that I have in and around my people, then rather than saying I think the risk is red, or I think it's high or critical or whatever you have it, we can turn the handle on that sausage machine and effectively run simulations that comes out with a priced risk. In this example here, I've simply done 10,000 simulations on every step in that staircase diagram, and come out with this little red line or this red curve. And it's effectively saying that given where we are today, if I spin the dice 10,000 times and I look at the threat prevalence and the controls and what have you, of those 10,000 times, I had 1,162 loss events. So that's roughly 12% of the time I have a loss event. Now that loss event could be minimal, or if I'm really, really unlucky, it could be a really, really big number. And in the example in the slide here, you know, the worst case or my maximum loss was something north of 12 million bucks. I have lots of losses. I have lots of smaller losses and fewer bigger losses. It's just like the lottery. You're more likely to win a little bit than you are to win the jackpot. All loss curves are pretty much variations of this. So there's usually a higher probability of losing a little and a small probability of losing a lot. So with this, you just go back in. Okay, so that red curve is every loss event out of my simulations, and if I average every single one of those probabilities and losses, I get the annualized the expected annualized loss value here. In other words, it's about 360K. If I were to put the controls in and around my people, then instead of there being a 12% chance of having a bad day this year, it's down to 6%. I could still have a really, really bad day, 10,382,000, whatever it is. You know, I could still have a really, really bad day, but it's far less likely. And if I average the points on that green line, my annualized loss expectancy is about half as much again. Okay, and if I go forward, this is the return on investment piece. So the red line is a straight line reflecting 361,000, an annualized loss of 361,000, and the green line is reflecting a loss of 168,000 each year. If I know it's going to cost me 600K to fix that the controls that make me move from red to green, and I know it's going to cost me 25K a year to operate those controls, I can get a break-even point. I can say that my return on investment is just about 3 years. I know I'm going to say, well, in this scenario, I don't care. This product is going away in 8 months. Therefore, I'm not going to spend an awful lot of money putting in a control which isn't going to have a return for 3 years. And that's far more influential in terms of conversations you have with the risk owners than saying, my risk is red, give me 20 million and it will still be red. Or, you know, if I'm lucky, it might be orange, whatever the heck that means.
Exactly. So what are the options for us here then? What kind of are we looking at?
So armed with numbers around risk, you can make really informed decisions about whether you're going to fix the problems or, you know, reduce the risk, close the gaps. You can decide whether you're going to take the gamble and risk accept. If you can't risk accept, you might want to transfer it to an insurance company. And if none of those are viable, you could probably think about avoiding the risk altogether. But in reality, that's pretty much a non-starter. If the business are going to go to the cloud, then chances are the business are going to go to the cloud. And saying, oh, no, you can't go to the cloud, you've got to buy another data center because of this risk, will probably have you laughed out of the room.
Then let me ask you this then, Paul. if we go back onto that slide, and I ask you then, from your experience and looking at what we see today, what do you think? Obviously, we want to fix it. We want to mitigate and reduce the gap, reduce the risk. But what is most common these days? What do you see most often? Are organizations just living with it, or are they kind of avoiding it? What are your views on it?
So it is very common for folk to accept risks without understanding what they're accepting. Oh, it's low. Oh, it's green. Let's accept another one. There's no way of aggregating those lows. And chances are that were you to aggregate those lows in quantitative terms, you're probably carrying an inordinate amount of risk, which are colored green, but they just don't get attention because people are simply going straight to ratings. So, they'll smell an issue, they'll be asked, oh, what do you think the impact is? Oh, I think the impact's bad. Because it could possibly be bad. It's probably not going to be anywhere near bad, but it could possibly be bad. So I'll cover my backside and I'll say, well, it's, it could be really bad. Similarly about the likelihood, oh, it could be really likely. So before you know it, you've got ratings that make no sense at all or don't reflect reality. And by looking at a traditional risk matrix, which combinations of reds and greens on those axes gives you the risk color. So it's dead easy to game the system and make your risks come out green. So, for me, the biggest risk an organization has is the way it does its assessments, the way it assesses and evaluates risk.
It's almost in a binary way, isn't it?
Yeah, and taking this approach, which OutThink's built into its DNA, you get the data, and you can't argue with real data.
Yeah, which can then be seen how it evolves over time. You can see how things are.
Exactly. Monitoring, trending. You can see early on that things are starting to go off piece. And of course, the other side of the coin is that if your modeling suggests that you're going to lose X this year, the year after, and whatever, and you actually lose half X or 10% of X, you take those real live events and you back test it into your model and you tune your model down accordingly. So, all models are wrong. It's just some of them are useful. And if you don't do that back testing, you honestly don't know whether your model is useful or not.
Perfect. Thank you. And we're roughly kind of 10 minutes away from the end, and it's great that we come then to our kind of conclusion and objectives. And here, I mean, we can all have something to say on this. I think the goal, at least from what I take from this session as well, is to understand that we've had that kind of binary traditional approach for the last maybe decade. And at the beginning, we saw that risk keeps going up, that loss keeps going up, investment keeps going up, but we don't have a lot of changes. And this is, I think Gartner is being incredibly optimistic, but it gives us hope as well that things are changing. And human risk quantification is now more than ever going to play a huge role when it comes to understanding risk, managing it, and mitigating it really within organizations. But I guess before we go on to questions, I'll ask you, Flavius, as well. How do you see then, what is the goal when it comes to human risk management, and OutThink being a cybersecurity human risk management platform focused on understanding people, understanding humans, and help organizations reduce risk by understanding what level of exposure really is there? How do you see things progressing?
It's really the last sentence there, Ines, helping organizations understand risk. There's a lot of talk in our space around behavioral change, security culture, but unfortunately, it's all fluffy. Let's change culture. Let's build a better culture around security. How do you go about that? As I said, I was a CISO, and at some point I've tried doing that for 12,000 people. How do you start? Well, so I think that the shift here is, and what Gartner's seeing and reporting, and I'm happy to note that OutThink is recognized by Gartner as an innovator in this space, as a human risk management platform. That shift is away from just some awareness and some fluffy security culture talk to actual data driving decisions that of course have a cost. That is the fundamental shift. And I think if we're not shifting our thinking and our approaches, then what are we doing really? Someone famously said the definition of insanity is doing the same thing, expecting different results. So yeah, it's great to see organizations, people, experts are thinking about this differently.
Perfect, thank you. Of course, we're reaching the end of our webinar, and thank you everyone for coming in, sticking with us. And for those of you that joined later during the webinar and you haven't picked up the beginning of the session, not to worry, we will be sending and following up and sending a recording of this. But what we'll also do for those of you that are interested in reading the Gartner reports, the most recent reports as well, that basically focuses on the human risk quantification side of things. And those that want to understand a little bit more about human risk quantification, what does it mean, human risk, and understanding human risk. So we'll share some materials as well, some links to some white papers as well, if you want to look more into that. Of course, if you want to find out more about how we do it at OutThink, how are we measuring human risk? How are we quantifying human risk and helping organizations? Then reach out to us. On the next slide, you have our socials here, you have our website, and of course, any follow-up questions, anything that may come up, Flavius and Paul are happy to receive your email with your questions. I told them they're allowed to ignore them if they want to, but please do not refrain from sending your questions through. We had a few questions through. Paul, you've addressed a couple. And Richard, yes, you can get a copy of the presentation if that's okay, that you wait a couple of days where we will be able to kind of send everything through. I do have a question for you guys. This is something that I get asked a lot from people that I speak to as well. But how can, with human risk quantification, and we've mentioned risk scorecards that are generated, how people love to see where things are pinged and what are people doing in the background and so on. But how can organizations really balance that need for that accurate risk quantification or human risk quantification with those ethical concerns around the collection of and use of, let's say, that kind of view within within people's behaviors? What are they doing? What things are they clicking, or email fatigue, or even information around training that is run? How do we balance this? How do we also educate organizations and kind of help them understand that it isn't about what your people are doing, but about how we can understand that risk and help you change it, like you said, Flavius, change that security culture, basically.
I'll probably provide the first half of the answer, and then Paul, I know you've been through this as well. Small battles with privacy, with legal. Look, from the OutThink perspective, as a SaaS platform, OutThink is certified and compliant with a number of security standards, highly secure. It's GDPR compliant as well. A number of privacy options are available. Things such as people opting out, data being anonymized, or only reported for groups larger than a set number of users to help alleviate some of those privacy concerns. Paul, what would you say to this? unmute again.
Jeez. Sorry, it's
Sorry,
it's been a long day already. What is it?
quite late.
So it really does go back to collecting and acting on the data, and I've lost count the number of times that I've not seen eye to eye with the likes of privacy or compliance. Nothing speaks louder than data, and the reason I purchased OutThink at my previous organization was because it gave me the data to support the direction that I wanted to go. Sorry, the direction that I needed to go. If folk in our game, we're here to help make things better, and we need to be able to measure where we are today, what we want to do about it, and then back test where we get to demonstrate that we spent the money and the resource on the right things. I fear that the privacy approach is anchored in subjective wet fingers in the air. It is getting better. I think DORA is going to help us a lot on the operational resilience, and privacy plays into that as well. But you have to have the data. If you don't have it, or you don't know what data you need, talk to Flavius, and then make your mind up whether you're prepared to go after collecting that data, or whether you can live without it. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just needs to be good enough. And having no data and deciding not to use any data and just stick the wrong person's wet finger in the air is not a defensible strategy.
Perfect. And I think understanding that data as well, I think, again, we can provide all of the data in the world, and sometimes security teams are overwhelmed, and many times it's a huge 50,000, 20,000 people organization to maybe a security team that has 1 to 2 people in it. And I think something that I can speak for OutThink, of course, what we do is also support that team understanding that data that is being provided to them. Yeah, thank you so much. I think, let's see if we still have time.